Welcome to the newscast. I'm Daniel Che. Let's start with the headlines. In the ongoing battle against the MERS virus, Korean experts say the government is on the right path, plus a team from the WHO joins in the efforts to tackle the outbreak. Japan's former Chief Cabinet Secretary Yohei Kono reaffirms his acknowledgement of his country's wartime sex crimes. In a discussion with a former prime minister from his country, Kono pointed out that Japan's military forced women from Korea and other countries into sexual slavery during World War II. The G7 summit wrapped up with a joint declaration that touched on various global issues, including carbon emissions and Russia's aggression against Ukraine. Let's start with the Middle East Respiratory Syndrome, or MERS, outbreak here in Korea. We go straight to our Kim Ji-yeon, who joins us at the news center. Ji-yeon, thanks for joining us. Can you give us the latest?
Well, Daniel, the central government announced that the MERS death toll had risen to 7 as of Tuesday evening, with the number of confirmed cases at 95. As a preventative measure, the government says it will examine all patients with pneumonia in 4 regions: the capital city of Seoul, Gyeonggi-do province, the city of Daejeon, and the city of Asan in Chungcheongnam-do province. It also plans to categorize all confirmed patients according to their conditions. Meanwhile, an official from Samsung Medical Center has confirmed that a pregnant woman whose due date is later this month and was receiving treatment there has contracted the MERS virus. The woman, who is in her 40s, is reportedly suffering from mild respiratory problems. We'll have more on this story as it develops. Daniel.
Well, there are rising concerns that MERS is spreading to other regions, as 2 people from Gyeonggi-do province and another one in Chungcheongnam-do province were confirmed earlier today, Ji-yeon. At this point, is it really possible to see an end to all this in a week's time, as the government suggests?
Well, for the past few weeks, the government has been criticized for its belated response when the MERS outbreak began, mostly for not being able to contain and keep track of those who had contact with the first patient. But local experts seem to agree that the government is, to a certain point, going in the right direction by taking proactive steps to contain the virus's spread. On a daily basis, the central government, the health ministry, and municipal governments have been sharing critical information with the public about how they're handling the situation. Just earlier today, acting Prime Minister Chungcheongnam-do set a new goal of trying to stop the virus's spread within the week and vowed to mobilize all necessary resources to combat the virus, including full coverage of all medical expenses for MERS patients.
There's a need to deal with the MERS outbreak at the serious level, the country's highest response level for infectious disease, instead of the current level of caution.
And with this information, the country is taking numerous steps toward containment. Right after the first MERS case was confirmed in Chungcheongnam-do province, health authorities there shut down 2 medical centers and where the patient had been undergoing treatment there. And around 2,200 schools and preschools, which is more than 10% of schools nationwide, have closed temporarily to prevent an outbreak among students. And you can see, all in all, that the country is working together in this trying time, and the government's response is a big part of that. And I'm not the only one who shares this view. An investigative team from the World Health Organization, which arrived in the country earlier this week, says the government is handling the MERS outbreak well, and the team, comprised of 16 members in total, is expected to initiate its own research and infection control measures starting today. And they will announce the results of its comprehensive evaluation of the MERS situation in Korea on Saturday.
Okay, going down to the personal hygiene issues. As preventative measures, we've been told over and over again that washing our hands thoroughly, that's a no-brainer there. Anything else we have to keep in mind to prevent the spread of the virus, Ji-yeon?
In fact, well, the city of Daejeon is on alert after Ulsan University Hospital confirmed a case of MERS in a patient who is currently in critical condition. The city is asking people who went to the hospital on the evening of May 6th to alert the health authorities, and you can do that by calling the MERS call center at 042120 or through the city's website there. And for the general public, meanwhile, the health ministry is asking people who don't require medical treatment at this time to refrain from visiting local hospitals and medical centers unless you're really sick. Back to you, Daniel.
Simple rules stated hereby. Thank you so much for that, Ji-yeon. Moving on, as the Korean government works around the clock to eradicate the MERS virus, President Park Geun-hye expressed concerns about the economic impact of the outbreak, ensuring the public her administration will do all that it can to contain the virus. She also asked for their support to help her reach that goal. Our Choi Yu-sun reports.
At Tuesday's cabinet meeting, President Park Geun-hye said the MERS outbreak should not put a damper on the Korean economy. She reassured the nation that the virus can be contained because it hasn't spread beyond the medical facilities into the general population.
국민 여러분께서도 마음이 불안하시겠지만 과민하게 반응해서 경제 활동이 위축되지 않도록 협조해 주시기를 바랍니다.
President Park then called on officials to take measures to minimize the virus's economic impact, such as by offering targeted support for businesses in the affected regions and industries. Stressing that patients can recover from a bout with MERS, the president asked the Korean people to report suspected cases of infection and to follow authorities' instructions after having come into contact with the virus.
정부와 의료계를 포함한 국민 모두가 합심해서 총력 대응해 나간다면 메르스를 빠른 시일 내에 종식시킬 수 있을 것입니다.
Looking ahead, President Park called for a system for responding and managing new types of diseases, especially in the era of globalization. Health authorities say the outbreak will hit a critical turning point in the coming days, and some members of both the ruling and opposition parties are urging the president to reschedule her U.S. visit next week. While President Park's spokesperson said there wasn't anything he could say about the upcoming trip, there's a possibility the president may decide to shorten it depending on developments in the outbreak. Choi Yu-sun, Arirang News.
And a parliamentary health committee held a meeting with medical experts this afternoon to discuss ways to contain the spread of the MERS virus. The experts outlined a number of steps the government can take to counter the outbreak. They said small and mid-sized hospitals should be provided with adequate medical supplies, and MERS test kits should be sent to hospitals and state-designated quarantine centers. Lawmakers vowed to come up with legislation to provide financial assistance for MERS-affected hospitals and confirm MERS patients. The medical experts also pointed out that private hospitals have been reluctant to treat potential MERS patients, as other people might avoid going to their hospitals, and urged the government to come up with appropriate measures. Now, understandably, there are concerns about the MERS outbreak, but some medical experts are staying positive. They say MERS is not as dangerous as people might think, and the virus can be brought under control in Korea for a number of solid reasons. Our Han Da-eun fills us in.
You don't need to worry about MERS if you're healthy, and the virus can be contained soon. That is the message many medical experts are sending out to Korea, where people have been waking up to fresh news about new MERS cases every morning for the past few weeks. Dr. Daniel Lucy, a professor at Georgetown University Medical Center, has said MERS is only a distant relative of the virus that caused SARS in 2003, and it's much less contagious than SARS or even the flu. He also reiterated what other experts have been saying, that MERS in Korea has only been transmitted at hospitals where patients with the virus are being treated. And he said it can be prevented from spreading into the general population, just as with other countries that have experienced MERS. That's because MERS doesn't spread easily from person to person without close contact. He also focused on the fact that most people without pre-existing conditions, including lung disease, kidney disease, and a few others, will only suffer a mild illness if they contract the virus. Dr. Lucy said the spread of MERS can be stopped soon with cooperation from all sectors of society. Doctors in Korea are also helping to educate the public about the disease, saying that tuberculosis, not MERS, is the single most dangerous infectious disease in the country now. They're calling attention to the fact that some 37,000 tuberculosis cases were confirmed in Korea in 2013 alone, with more than 2,400 deaths the same year. The Ministry of Health and Welfare at a press briefing Tuesday said it expects the fatality rate for MERS to stay below 10% in Korea. That's much lower than the 40% reported before the outbreak began. Authorities say it remains to be seen how far MERS will spread in Korea, but what's more important is to refrain from spreading fear and maintain good hygiene by washing your hands regularly. Handan, Arirang News.
Over at the National Assembly, we're still waiting for the confirmation hearing for Prime Minister nominee Hwang Kyo-won to resume. While the hearing is scheduled to get started again at 7 p.m., the afternoon session, which was supposed to begin at 2 p.m., was delayed by a boycott by the opposition parties over the submission of documents. We connect live with our National Assembly correspondent Park Ji-won for the latest. Hello, Ji-won.
Hi, Daniel. The hearing hasn't gotten started again since the morning session ended at around noon. The opposition parties boycotted the afternoon session after the nominee failed to submit some of the requested documents by the start of the afternoon session. They said without them it's impossible to properly scrutinize the nominee's qualifications, and they urged Hwang to turn them in as soon as possible. Of the documents he didn't submit, the most controversial ones are those related to legal cases that he dealt with when he was a lawyer at a major law firm before he became the Justice Minister. Hwang was paid a whopping $1.5 million for the 17 months he spent at the firm, and many have questioned his role there because he didn't take many cases during the time. Korea's Legal Ethics and Professional Conduct Council handed over 19 documents about the cases to the hearing committee, but the two main parties disagree about how much information should be disclosed. Ruling party lawmakers sided with the nominee in saying the documents should not be opened, citing attorney-client privilege, while opposition lawmakers argue that the documents should be disclosed to clear away any remaining doubts about the nominee. Currently, the floor leaders of both rival parties are still locked in negotiations, and they agreed to resume the hearing at 7 p.m. I will bring you more on this story in our next newscast. I'm Park Ji-won at the National Assembly in Seoul.
Thank you for that, Ji-won. Hopefully they can get it moving along soon. Moving on to other stories, senior officials from Korea and Japan held talks in Seoul today to try and resolve a heated row over Tokyo's controversial bid to inscribe wartime industrial facilities as UNESCO World Heritage Sites. This was their second meeting on the matter. Tokyo is seeking World Heritage status for 23 industrial facilities, despite the fact that 7 of them used nearly 60,000 Koreans as forced laborers during Japan's colonial rule of Korea. The final decision on the bid will be made during a meeting of the World Heritage Committee early next month in Germany. A former Japanese politician has reaffirmed that women from Korea and other countries were forcibly recruited as comfort women for Japanese troops during World War II. During a discussion on Tuesday with former Prime Minister Tomiichi Murayama, former Cabinet Secretary Yohei Kono brought up the case of Dutch women forced into sexual slavery while living in Indonesia, a former colony of the Netherlands. Kono said it was clear that the Japanese military took them and made them serve as comfort women. As Chief Cabinet Secretary, Kono had issued a landmark apology in 1993 about the comfort women issue, who were forced to work in Japan's wartime military brothels. World leaders at the G7 summit in Germany have agreed that the world should end its reliance on fossil fuels within this century. They also pledged to take action on a range of issues from the crisis in Ukraine to Islamic extremism. To tell us more, here's our Son Jung-in.
Leaders of 7 major world economies wrapped up their 2-day summit on Monday with a joint declaration that touched on a variety of global issues. Their agreements on climate change have drawn the most attention. The leaders endorsed a goal of zero carbon emissions worldwide by the year 2100.
We have clearly said as the G7 that we need binding rules at the heart of the climate agreement. The world does not have any binding rules at the moment, and therefore that must be a goal in Paris.
Ahead of a United Nations climate meeting in France later this year, the G7 agreed to limit the rise in global temperatures to 2 degrees Celsius compared to pre-industrial levels and to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by as much as 70% by 2050. With regard to the crisis in Ukraine, the 7 countries reiterated that sanctions against Russia will remain in place until a ceasefire deal is fully respected.
And the G7 is making it clear that if necessary, we stand ready to impose additional significant sanctions against Russia.
Talking about the strategy against Islamic State militants in Arab nations, Obama said the international community is willing to do more to fight against terrorism and violent extremism. The declaration also strongly condemned North Korea for its continued development of nuclear and ballistic missile programs and for its appalling human rights violations. 손정인, Arirang News.
In other news, household loans in Korea posted the largest monthly gain ever in April on the back of a record low key interest rate and eased housing regulations. The Bank of Korea says the household lending by banking and non-banking institutions stood at over $684 billion as of the end of April, up almost $9 billion from the previous month. That marks the biggest growth since the central bank began compiling data in 2003. By sector, banks' household loans took up 90% of the gain, totaling $7.8 billion. And while household debt surges as more people rush to borrow money to buy homes, the number of housing transactions in the country surpassed the 100,000 mark for the 3rd straight month in May. A report by the Finance Ministry shows that the figure stood at over 109,000 last month, up 40.5% from a year earlier. That also represents a 9-year sales record for the month of May since 2006, when the ministry started compiling the related data. That's all for now. Thank you for watching.